you're going to church.
Yeah, it's just so odd. I mean, to a normal Christian who goes to church on Sunday, and they go because there's a desire to fellowship and there's a desire to plant a church community where the community can have outreach and help the community grow and influence the community in a positive way. This idea is just so foreign to them, to sit in seclusion in your home where you can't have any impact on the community whatsoever and press play on a tape from the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. It reminds me, I don't know if you saw it, the show called WandaVision, where the Marvel superhero is stuck in the, I think it was the 40s or 50s that she's stuck in, and she's watching the old black and white TV shows, and it's this black and white world. But there's this recurring theme in fantasy and especially in horror, where somebody is stuck in the mindset of something in the past. And for me, that's what it was like, because we were literally listening to sermons talking about events that happened long before I was even born. And after you leave that and you experience a normal church where there are efforts to help the homeless people, for example, that's one of the big things in the church that my family attends now. And there's all of these motives to help the community grow and become better. And the church is a good place to do that. But yet we sat in seclusion. So sorry for the rabbit trail, but I had to talk about that because that's something we have in common.
Yes, definitely. I think you're right. I also think the way I rationalized it once I came out was we are kind of subconsciously programmed to be isolated like that. I think there's a big fear in a lot of the churches in the message that if you do explore, or you do go to a denominational church, or you do get too big, outreach and things like that were always kind of negatively looked on at most of the churches that I went to. It was, we're elite, we have our own path. That's not what we're called to do. We're called to get more revelation. We're called to be the bride. And, we stick to ourselves, kind of a thing. And that never really bothered me until toward the end, when I started to wonder why, why are we elite? Why aren't we helping people? Why aren't we doing more outreach? And of course I'll explain that in a minute, but I wasn't, in the message, so to speak, at that point. I had kind of went out into the world, as they say. So I was seeing more of those denominations, and we were visiting some churches, and I was seeing the outreach and seeing the difference in, the involvement in the community. And I really started to wonder at that point, why don't we do that in the message? Because we preach all day long, save those souls, bring everyone to God, but the outreach isn't there. At least it wasn't at most of the churches that I went to for any amount of time. So, but yeah, I think they're very much, even if the pastors don't realize it, I think that we are programmed in a way to be secluded and to, things like those home churches that people have where they just, get together in a really small group and listen to tapes. To them, that's kind of a ideal scenario where, we're small, we got our own thing going. We're not involved with the outside world. And I don't know, I think it's kind of a good thing in their eyes, when in reality I look back and I'm like, that's so strange, just crazy.
Yeah, it's so odd. I'm one of the few Christians who's actually read their Bible. I'm learning that this is a thing, and I'm actually very shocked that in a world where people are going to churches and they profess Christianity, they don't even read the book that is like the thing that should be the thing that helps them know their religion. They don't read it. So I'm a little surprised. But take that to a message believer. I'm also one of the few that actually listened to the recordings and paid attention when I listened. There's a vast majority of people who have no idea what are on these things. And what I did not have at the time that I was in this thing was the ability to critically think, analyze, and piece together the flow of this thing, because it wasn't just one message. This is the most shocking thing to me of all. It wasn't one message. There were messages. There were different platforms and different stage personas that he would enter into. And I didn't know this because I had not critically thought about the timeline and lined them up. But in the early years, as with any cult, it's always everybody's welcome. I don't care who you are. You can be Catholic, you can be Baptist, come join us. We're all one people. And if one of the quotes that Branham used was, if they draw you out of your circle, I'm going to draw a bigger circle and draw you into it. We're all going to be one. And that's a good thing. He said some good things, and that is one of them. But like all destructive cults, as time went on and he started introducing some very heretical, very evil things, well, people started cutting him off, and then he says, okay, if you're not going to play with me, I'm just going to take my group of people away from you. I'm going to draw them out of your circles. And so you go to the latter years, and it's a isolationist religion. And people, unfortunately, are stuck in that isolationist mode because before he died, it became that, and then it became hyper-isolationist. And to the extent, I've actually sat in churches where they would talk about the people who were in the same city that were cannon fodder. And this term means basically these are the expendable troops that we know we're going to send them into the battlefield and they're just going to be blown to bits by cannons. And we don't care because it's going to strategically advance our troops. That's how they saw every other Christian in the city instead of coming together in a community, which is so wrong and so backwards. So I'm also interested because you are one of the few people who left the message but didn't leave the message mentality and had to address that later. I was very surprised the first time I encountered a person like this. He had been away, gosh, I want to say it was like 20 years, and he'd been in different churches. Now he's real big in the leadership in the church that he's at now, but he had almost lost religion altogether because he would try a church, and this stuff they had grilled into our heads was stuck in his head, and he didn't realize what it was doing to him psychologically. So I'd like to talk through that a bit. What was it like leaving the message but not leaving it from your head?
Yeah, so that is very interesting, and I have not met very many people like myself who have gone through that. So most of the people that I know who have left the message they left, like they don't believe it anymore. They don't want to go to church. They don't believe any of the doctrine. They just quit cold turkey kind of a situation. But for me, we left, it was shortly after we got married in 2014. So maybe 2015, we got very, very hurt at the church we were going to. So my husband was from that church that came up from Georgia. He was part of that congregation. And we reconnected years later, a long series of events. And we ended up going to that younger pastor's church. He had now established a building here in Tennessee, and we started going there, my mom and my sisters and I. And that's where I met my husband. So we got married in that church. And that was a fiasco, the wedding. So many stories. But anyway, that particular pastor has a habit of, if you do something that is wrong, he will call you out from the pulpit, sometimes by name.
Wow.
And that's just the way he operates in his church. So I guess my dress had been not as conservative as he would have liked, which, looking back, I feel like it was a pretty conservative dress. My mom was very conservative. She would have never let me, be in a wedding dress that was considered non-conservative. We put panels in because it was a little low. We had sewed panels in the front and the back and added sleeves to it. They were cap sleeves, which that's a no-no with a lot of people in the message. Those cap sleeves will send you to hell. So he preached from the pulpit. It was a series of things, that he had been saying from the pulpit that were offensive to me and my husband. We already had one foot out anyway. We were on the fence at that point. And then he directly attacked me about my wedding dress in a sermon one Sunday morning, and made a huge deal out of the fact that nobody was allowed to get married anymore unless he approved their wedding dress. And he, after that sermon, he literally tacked a poster to the bulletin board in the church about this huge list of requirements for a wedding dress and that it has to be approved by the pastor and all these things, which everyone in the future can thank me for that. I was the cause. So that was it for me. I was like, okay, this is not Christianity. I was mad.
This is
I was
nuts.
like, yeah, I was like, this is crazy. I'm not going to sit in church and everybody in that church knows he's talking to me. He's looking right at me. He basically could have said my name at that point, and it wouldn't have made a difference. Everybody knew what he was talking about. So we left. And we went sporadically here and there at that. Not long after that, my mom left that church and went back to a different church in Tennessee. And so his family was at the one, mine was at the other. So we kind of bounced around back and forth and would go a little bit. And that's when we kind of really had our a wild child time, I like to call it. We did all the things that we were never allowed to do. We went drinking and did all the things that, as a messaged kid, you're not allowed to do. So, and then we calmed down after a while. And the whole time I never had this thought like the message is not the truth. I didn't like that. I was upset with that pastor and I didn't believe that he was preaching as he should. But I didn't believe that like the message was false or anything like that. And I always thought in the back of my head, I'll go back. I'm going to do my thing for a while. I'm hurt. I'm angry. I'm having fun right now. I'll go back at some point. And I continued with that mentality